Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at something that you might have heard of called a non sequitur.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to kind of go into what it is, what are some examples of it,
Right.
what does it mean? And we've got some great sources here to really dig into this. ThoughtCo, Quillbot, and just a whole bunch of examples and definitions and even analysis of how non sequiturs are used in different fields.
Yeah, like comedy and art.
Yeah, I mean they really are all over the place, and it's kind of fascinating to sort of dig into this concept that can be a logical fallacy, but also a tool for humor.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to kind of kick us off, what exactly is a non sequitur?
Well, it's Latin for "it does not follow,"
Okay.
which is a little ironic because the term itself is kind of a non sequitur.
Okay, I see.
But yeah, basically it's when the conclusion of an argument doesn't logically follow from the premises.
So, I mean, are there any kind of I guess sort of relatable examples that you could think of?
Let me see. So like if I said all birds have feathers, penguins have feathers, therefore penguins are birds.
Okay. Yeah.
That actually does make sense, but it's kind of a silly way to go about it.
Yeah.
But it illustrates that the conclusion does follow the premises logically.
Okay.
But let's see. If I said, my dog loves belly rubs, all dogs are loyal, therefore my dog deserves a promotion at work.
Okay. So the first two parts make sense.
Right.
Dogs do love belly rubs and all dogs are loyal.
Right.
But then the last part, the conclusion, it's not really related.
Exactly. It's a non sequitur. Because while the premises might be true, the jump to the conclusion that the dog deserves a promotion is where the logic breaks down.
Right.
And that's what defines a non sequitur.
And Brainly gives this kind of great example that's maybe a little more down to earth. They said, Mrs. Martin is a very kind person, so she must be a good teacher.
Right.
I mean, it kind of sounds, at first, it's like, yeah, well, if she's kind, then yeah, she must be a good teacher. But when you really think about it, just because someone's a kind person doesn't necessarily mean they're a good teacher.
Right. There's no inherent connection there.
Right.
And that's what makes it a non sequitur.
Yeah.
You're assuming a connection that might not exist.
And so this is what I think is so tricky about non sequiturs is that they can sound pretty convincing at first. And the Quillbot blog actually offers a few questions that we can ask ourselves when we're kind of evaluating an argument. Like, could the premises be true and the conclusion still be false? If that's the case, then we might be encountering a non sequitur, but it's not always about winning a debate or something like that.
Right.
It's not always, this sort of logical fallacy in a formal setting.
Right.
We also encounter non sequiturs all the time in conversation.
Absolutely. And that's where the definition expands beyond just a logical fallacy.
Okay.
Merriam-Webster actually just defines a non sequitur as a statement that does not follow logically from or is not clearly related to anything previously said.
Okay, so it's like the statement itself is just kind of out of place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, someone is talking about going to the movies and then someone else just says, I like watermelon.
Exactly. It's like, where does that come from? It
Yeah.
doesn't follow the flow of the conversation.
Right. And so I guess, sometimes that can just be sort of a thing that someone says, but sometimes it's also intentional, right?
Absolutely, especially in comedy.
Yeah. And the blog post mentions Groucho Marx as being a master of this.
Oh, yeah. Lines like, I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I'll never know.
I mean, that's hilarious.
It's absurd.
It makes no sense.
But that's what makes it funny.
So how does that work? Why do non sequiturs make us laugh?
Well, I think it has something to do with how our brains process information. We're constantly trying to predict what's coming next to make sense of the flow of information. A non sequitur throws a wrench in that process.
Okay.
It creates that moment of surprise, of cognitive dissonance, where we're forced to reevaluate what we thought we understood. It's like our brains are saying, wait, what just happened? How did we get from A to Z?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of that scramble to make sense of it can actually be what makes us laugh.
Yeah.
It's like the unexpectedness of it.
Yeah, it's like a mental tickle.
Yeah.
A sudden shift in perspective that catches us off guard and delights us with its absurdity.
It's like almost like we're enjoying the fact that it doesn't make sense.
Right.
But I mean, it's not just about humor.
No.
Right.
No. Non sequiturs can be used to create other effects.
Like what?
Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, for example. The Queen of Hearts constantly shouts, "Off with their heads,"
Right.
in completely unrelated situations. It's a non sequitur that adds to the overall feeling of Wonderland being nonsensical and unpredictable.
Right. Right. It's both funny and also kind of scary.
Yeah, it's a little unsettling, and it highlights the absurdity of the Queen's power and reinforces the theme of the story, which is that in Wonderland, logic doesn't apply.
Right. Right. So we see how non sequiturs can be used in writing to create humor, to build a specific tone or even reinforce a theme. But what about in things like comics or films?
Yeah.
Are there ways that non sequiturs can be used visually?
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
One of our sources, an article by Caitlin McCafferty in Art Deco, explores how comic book artists and filmmakers use non sequitur transitions to shape the viewer's experience.
Okay, so I guess before we even go into this, can you explain what exactly does non sequitur transitions mean
Sure.
in this context?
So imagine a comic panel showing a close-up of someone's eye,
Okay.
followed by a panel showing a bustling city street,
Okay.
and then a final panel of a single wilting flower in a vase.
Those don't seem to, have any kind of direct connection.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's the point. These non sequitur transitions force the viewer to become more active in creating meaning. Instead of passively following a linear narrative, you have to piece together those seemingly unrelated images and draw your own conclusions about how they connect.
So I guess in a way, it's kind of like that conversational non sequitur where you're forced to sort of reevaluate what you thought you understood, but this time visually.
Exactly. And this can be a really powerful storytelling technique.
So this is fascinating. So we've seen how non sequiturs can be logical fallacies,
Right.
tools for humor, and even techniques for visual storytelling. It's amazing how this one concept has so much more to it than you might think at first.
It really does.
Yeah.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
What non sequiturs are, how they can be bad for arguments, but also kind of cool for creative things. And now I'm kind of eager to see some examples of this from the stuff we read.
Yeah.
It's one thing to just talk about it, but seeing it in action is really when things click.
Right.
For me.
Yeah, I agree. Let's start with those examples of non sequiturs in writing that ThoughtCo provided. Remember that one about Mr. Smith? Something like, slim, of medium height, and with sharp features, Mr. Smith's technical skills are combined with strong leadership qualities. So grammatically, it works.
But yeah, what do his looks have to do with his leadership skills? It's like they're trying to sneak in an association there that isn't really there. It's almost like I don't know, like a magician's trick or something. Misdirection.
That's a great analogy. It highlights how non sequiturs can be used, even unintentionally, to manipulate or persuade.
Right. And you see that all the time in advertising.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Or even political speeches, where the goal is really more about playing on your emotions than actually giving you a logical argument. It's like those commercials that show beautiful people laughing and drinking a soda, and they want you to think that if you drink that soda, you'll also be beautiful and have lots of friends.
Right.
But it doesn't really follow, does it?
No, not logically.
And so I guess, this is where it gets tricky. It's like you have to, be aware of those non sequiturs so you can really analyze what is the message that's being presented.
Right. It's about separating the fluff from the substance of an argument.
And that kind of leads into the legal definition of non sequitur from Wex. They mention how the term can describe a legal conclusion that doesn't follow from the evidence.
Right. So it's like saying that because someone was seen near the scene of a crime, they must be guilty.
But that doesn't necessarily follow.
Right.
Yeah.
There needs to be a stronger link than just proximity.
Yeah.
To establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, it really shows how important, just thinking clearly and logically, it's important not just for philosophy class or something. It's important for real life stuff.
Absolutely. It can have huge consequences.
This kind of reminds me of, I think earlier we touched on the difference between non sequitur and post hoc fallacies.
Mm-hmm.
And they both have to do with, not great reasoning, but they're different. Thoughtco explains that non sequiturs have a missing logical connection,
Right.
whereas post hoc has a missing causal connection.
Right.
So maybe give an example to make this clearer.
So, for example, if someone said, I started taking this new vitamin and my headaches went away, so the vitamin must have cured my headaches.
Okay, so it could be true.
Right, it might be.
But there might be another explanation.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's post hoc. There could be other reasons for the headaches disappearing, completely unrelated to the vitamin.
Okay, so they're assuming that just because they started taking the vitamin, that caused the headaches to go away.
Right.
Whereas a non sequitur, like, I don't know, it would be like saying, I take vitamins, therefore I'm healthy.
Right. It's a conclusion that doesn't logically follow.
Because being healthy means more than just taking a vitamin.
Exactly. And understanding the difference between these two types of fallacies can really sharpen your critical thinking skills.
Right. So it's another tool
Right.
for thinking more clearly.
Exactly. Now let's go back to McCafferty's analysis of non sequitur transitions in visual media. I think this is where the concept of cognitive dissonance really shines. She argues that those jarring transitions between images can actually make you think more deeply.
It's almost like the opposite of what you would think.
Right.
Like, you would think that if a story is told in a really clear way, then it's easier to understand. But she's saying that making it a little hard to follow can actually be a better experience.
Right, exactly. It's about challenging your expectations and forcing you to think more actively.
Okay.
Think about it like this. A traditional linear narrative is like being led through a museum by a tour guide.
Okay.
You see what they want you to see and you hear their interpretation of it. But a film or comic that uses non sequitur transitions is like being given a map and told to explore the museum on your own.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. So it's like instead of just being told, what to think, you have to figure it out yourself.
Exactly.
It reminds me of those choose your own adventure books.
Oh yeah.
Where you're not just reading the story, you're also kind of shaping it.
Right, exactly.
With your choices.
And that active participation can be really rewarding, right?
Yeah.
It allows you to bring your own unique perspective to the work. It's like solving a puzzle where the pieces don't fit together in the usual way, but you still have to figure out how they connect.
And this kind of brings up another point that McCafferty talks about. She talks about the role of sound, in film, for instance, and how it can actually amplify this effect.
Right.
I remember we were talking about like a peaceful nature scene, but then like the music is really jarring.
Right.
And it kind of creates this feeling of I don't know, like unease or tension or something.
Exactly. The sound contradicts the visuals, and it makes you question what you're seeing and hearing.
So I guess the music is kind of like a non sequitur too in that way.
Precisely. Sound can completely transform the meaning of a visual sequence, especially when it's used in unexpected ways.
Yeah. So the filmmaker is playing with a lot of different things at the same time. The images, the sound, and what we expect.
Exactly. It makes for a more multisensory experience.
Yeah. So we've looked at non sequiturs in writing and logic, in legal stuff, and even now with visual media, it's pretty amazing how this one concept, shows up in all these different places.
Yeah, and we're starting to see how language, thought, and expression are all kind of interconnected.
Right. It's like the same basic principle, whether it's in a bad argument, a funny joke, or a really great movie.
Exactly. It's all about recognizing those patterns and understanding the intent behind them and using them to achieve a certain effect.
And understanding that can make us better thinkers, better at taking in information, and maybe even better at expressing ourselves.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up this part, let's touch again on that difference between non sequiturs and other logical fallacies, because I think it's important to know that while formal fallacies are all basically non sequiturs, there are also some other specific fallacies that have their own names.
Right. Like affirming the consequent, for example. Oh. Remember that legal example from the Quillbot blog?
Yeah.
Just because evidence points to a particular conclusion doesn't automatically mean the conclusion is true. There might be other explanations.
Right, right. It's like in those mystery books, where it seems like, oh, this guy did it, but then it turns out, he didn't,
Right.
and it was actually someone else.
Exactly. And then there's also denying the antecedent, which is a lot of times mistaken for a non sequitur.
Can you explain that again?
Yeah, so it's like if someone argues that if the first part of a conditional statement is false, then the second part must also be false. For example, if it's raining, the streets are wet. It's not raining, therefore the streets aren't wet.
But the streets could be wet for another reason.
Exactly. Just because it's not raining doesn't mean the streets are dry.
Okay, so knowing these specific types of fallacies, it can help us, really see how an argument falls apart.
Right, and avoid making the same mistakes.
Right, it's like having, a little cheat sheet or something.
Exactly. And as we become more adept at spotting them, we become more critical thinkers overall. So we've gone really deep into non sequiturs.
Yeah.
From arguments to, movie techniques. But there's one more thing I'd like to talk about. How can knowing about non sequiturs help us be more creative?
Yeah, okay.
That's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
And we are back for the final part of our deep dive into non sequiturs. So we've looked at how they can be used and misused in all kinds of ways. But I'm wondering what you think as an expert about, what this all means for us, for how we think and live, the big picture.
That's a really interesting question. I think when we look at, the big picture, non sequiturs force us to really think about how we connect things in our minds.
Yeah.
What really follows from what, and when. When is that connection real, and when is it just something our brain made up?
Yeah, that's pretty deep, and it makes me realize that I probably make a lot of those jumps without even realizing it, just assuming that things are related when maybe they aren't.
And I think that awareness is more important now than ever because, we're surrounded by information all the time. The news, social media, advertisements, they're all trying to, get us to believe things or buy things or just get our attention.
And a lot of times, like we've seen, they use non sequiturs to do that, like sneaky little tricks to get our brains to make those jumps without really questioning it.
Right. So the big question is, how do we become more aware of that? How do we protect ourselves from that kind of manipulation?
Well, I'm realizing that just knowing what a non sequitur is a huge help. Like now that I know what to look for, I see them everywhere. It's kind of like, like having a new superpower or something.
Right. It's like you've developed this radar for bad logic. Yeah. And you can start to filter it out.
Exactly. And it's not just about, what other people say. It's about my own thinking too. Like I'm starting to notice when I'm jumping to conclusions myself without really thinking things through.
It's about being more mindful of your own thought processes. And that can be a really powerful thing.
But here's the thing that I think is really cool. Non sequiturs can be bad, like we said.
Yeah.
But they can also be really creative. Like those artists and filmmakers who use them to make you see things in a new way.
Right. They're challenging you to think for yourself, not just accepting what they're presenting at face value.
And isn't that what creativity is all about? Like breaking the rules, seeing connections that other people don't see. So I'm starting to think that maybe non sequiturs aren't just something to avoid, but something that we can use to be more creative ourselves.
I think you're right. A lot of great ideas come from taking those mental leaps, from connecting things that seem totally unrelated.
So a non sequitur in a story or a song or even just, like when you're brainstorming ideas, it can be that spark that leads to something really new.
Exactly. It can be that little jolt that gets your creativity flowing.
This has been a really, really fascinating conversation. I feel like I've learned so much about something that I never really thought about before.
And that's what we aim for in our deep dives, taking a simple idea and uncovering all those layers of meaning.
So before we go, I want to leave everyone with a little challenge. As you go about your day, just pay attention to those moments where something doesn't quite add up. Like maybe someone's making an argument that doesn't make sense, or you hear a joke that's funny because it's so random, or you're watching a movie and a scene just feels totally out of place.
Exactly. Don't just brush those moments off. Take a second to think about them. Ask yourself, what's the point of this? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to be funny or maybe make you think about something in a new way?
Right, because those moments, even though they might seem illogical, they can actually teach us a lot about how our minds work, how we communicate with each other, and how we make sense of the world around us.
And who knows, maybe you'll even start using a few non sequiturs yourself in your writing, your conversations, your everyday life.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time.